Cool. All right, well, cool. Well, some people jump in, jump out. Obviously, you guys feel free to jump in if you have questions. Rafi, let's start with this question that we got. We've got a list of questions, and then we can always jump
Sure.
into other subjects. But this first one is, what are the current market expectations when it comes to benefits such as student loan repayment, PTO, flexibility, etc.? What are you seeing when it comes to hiring on those types of things?
Yeah, I think it depends on kind of the size of the organization and kind of the expectations, obviously, of the candidates. Like we're a small clinic, 10 people max, usually, give or take. So most of the times when people come in and are asking about benefits and PTO, the discussion really is around PTO. Do we pay for continuing ed? Opportunities for like non-clinical work has been huge recently. Like, what are the opportunities to do some marketing or to do some business admin or something like that? And maybe that's just a function of our size, right? Like people come in and they know we're not the big medical hospital here, the big teaching hospital. Like we just don't have money to give you for your student loans. You can, depending on where you're at, and we've done this a little bit too. Like our clinic is located in an underserved area, so there are some federal grants and some federal programs for students, and that's been a draw for sure. So I would say like if you're a small clinic, it's probably not that big of a discussion because the people that have applied to speak to you or to work with at your organization probably know that they have that expectation going in that y'all are a small clinic, probably not doing a whole lot of student loan repayment unless you're in like an underserved area and you can like connect them with those federal grants and stuff like that. Big
And
organizations though, like that's part of the deal. They want student loan repayments, they want some
yeah.
sign-on bonuses, the whole nine yards.
And what's your kind of general approach to hiring, Rafi, if you don't mind sharing? How do you approach it as far as, is it more of a networking thing where you're trying to just build as many relationships and then when the time comes, all right, tap into those relationships, or how do you approach it?
Yeah, so we always have like open job postings on, the ADP, I think does like the Career Plus or whatever, like sends it to all those job boards. We always have a couple open there. We take a bunch of students at the clinic, and we've really liked taking level one or like first year PT students. One, because they're quick, they're like 1 week, 2 week rotations. That doesn't require a whole lot of admin burden on our clinicians. Um, and we use that as like, I think about it like a tiered approach. So if you do well in a like we like you like us in one of these early rotations, later down when you're looking at long-term clinical rotations or even fellowships or something like that, like um, we've already kind of sussed you out a little bit. But then also like we've got a lot of people that have come through the clinic on like a 1 week rotation, 2 week rotation, and then they end up applying for a job later, or they end up connecting us with somebody. Because I was a professor at the university, I just always keep good relationships. I'm always up there a couple times a year giving guest lectures. And when I do that, I swing by both the OT and the PT department to kind of chat it up, tell them a little bit about us, what we're looking for, if we're hiring, that sort of thing. And then the other thing is we have, a team of 6 or 7 clinicians, I think. Um, and they've got a bunch of friends and people that they want to work with. And from a cultural standpoint, I'm a big believer in like A players want to play with A players. So if you have a lot of people, like a team that's dialed in and you really like working with them, they're getting their job done, it's a good culture. Like I reach out to the team and I'm like, hey, do you know anybody that's interested in work? Because we've got a position opening up in 30 days, 90 days or whatever. And they'll go out and find people for you. They're like, oh yeah, we love working here. This is why. They're usually bringing somebody that's not going to be crap because they don't want to work with them if they're that way, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the way that we think about like recruiting in general, and then the actual like interview hiring process is a different thing altogether. But yeah.
And how do you formulate the need for, hey, we're going to need people in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Like, what are you calculating on your end to say, is it as simple as, hey, someone's going to quit, they've given us a heads up, or we're going to likely have a bunch more patients, because it's X time a year? How do you put that together?
Yeah, both and right. So we've had a couple, like one of our PTs just went out on maternity leave. Like we knew that was coming. And we're kind of in the interview process right now with a couple candidates to cover her maternity leave. And that's like, everybody knows like the expectations is a short-term 3-month deal.
Yeah.
But we knew that obviously 9 months ago, so we were planning for it. Some other times it's like it might be referral volume, or like if we sign an agreement, like we just signed an agreement recently with a personal injury firm that's like well, it's like a network, not so much one firm, but they basically are the funnel, the top end of the funnel for personal injury cases for lawyers, and part of their value add is connecting PTs to them.
Yeah.
Obviously, they take a cut of the settlement, which is how they get paid, which is great. But so we signed that agreement. They kind of had an expectation for how many referrals they would send to us, and I think in the first couple weeks we picked up like 10 or something like that. So that like triggered it. It was like, okay, just based off volume and run rate, we're going to need to hire somebody soon to cover these, and so we're in the middle of trying to find somebody to do that too.
Yeah. No, that's super cool. I know Justin Stivers talked about with using students that they went as far as to like have a spot where the students can stay for the summer. They bought an apartment. I know obviously not every clinic can afford to just buy an apartment straight up and say we'll house you there, but for some of the bigger clinics and areas that are very competitive, it's an opportunity to do it. Thomas, Victoria, Shiny, anybody have any questions for Rafi? If not, we'll keep going here. But feel free to jump in and give your kind of specific example for your clinic. What challenges you're dealing with.
This is Victoria. I would say that I'm just having a hard time getting therapists at all, even any interest in any of the ads that I've got placed. So I'm an extremely small clinic. We've just been open for 2 years, and I have myself and one other therapist. And I guess right now we're going through a summer lull, I suppose, because we are really low as far as patient and caseload goes. But I was just wondering, like, if there were any, tried methods. I've already gotten in contact with one of the area schools. I'm here in Atlanta, so we have several to try to get on their rotation for students. So that was a good suggestion.
Yeah, I think if you're small, you've got a couple options, right? Like you can run paid ads for jobs; those are kind of hit or miss. We have tried to funnel candidates to either I think we've got a couple YouTube videos last time I checked, like on landing pages on the website that have a form to fill out, like if you're interested. So we're not running. I'm not into complexity, so let me say that. And somebody might have figured out a way to run a targeted Facebook ad where you can put like your special category of ad and figure out how to target people you like. I've never found that successful. I always run awry of their standards or whatever. So I just run like a standard ad that basically targets PTs, but not targeting them for a job, right? It's usually like the 10 things to look for in an employer, or make sure you don't end up in a PT mill or burnt out or something like that. And that lands them on a landing page, a little squeeze page that's got a video about us, which is like cut up interview segments that I've done about just my thoughts on work and the meaning of like your role as a clinician and the value you bring and the role you play on the team and all of that. And then under that is like a form to fill out. And we like, when it's really bad and we're like, holy cow, we need to find somebody stat, we'll turn on the ads to that. And it's basically like, if you've read a Dan Kennedy book, it's, one of those styles of like long form sales letter, targeting specifically PTs who hate their job and want to go somewhere else. So, and that's kind of what we do. It costs some money up front. I think you're probably spending $20-$30 a lead by the time they get into the door. But then you've got a group of candidates who are interested. They've watched a video about what your culture is and kind of how I think it's very important from a standpoint of like expectations and like attracting the right people, like to be very upfront about what you do and don't believe. Not to sound all Simon Sinek-y, but like if your culture, if your mission, vision, values resonate with a candidate, you're going to have a lot more negotiating. This sounds bad. Negotiating power in the actual hiring and recruitment process, because they want to work for you. It changes the dynamic from like, crap, we need somebody really, really bad and we'll take a warm body to, this is a an encounter, if you would, or an exploration between two professionals discerning whether or not there's fit enough to take the next step. And if the answer is yes, that's great, but it's very much vetting on both sides. And it just changes the dynamic a little bit. So we've done that. I think the last time we did that was a couple years ago. And like I said, I think we spent $27-30 a lead. By the time they ended up in the top end funnel, it generated us 10-ish. It was probably 9 people that filled out the form. We interviewed 2 or 3 of them, hired 1. Like that's just how it went. And then just figuring out your math all the way down.
Yeah, I think it's a good point too, Rafi, about for smaller clinics. One of the questions in here was, how do we stay competitive with employment offers when we're up against hospitals giving 5-figure sign-on bonuses? To get, competitive with that, you have to state your why. You have to state and really win on culture there, because you're not going to give a $5,000, $10,000 signing bonus.
Exactly. We actually just had we hired a PTA, like maybe, I think she's been with us now a month, give or take. She's great. She's an awesome culture fit. She had it was mid 4 figures, 4 or 5 grand, something like that, a sign-on bonus that her employer had given her a year ago, and she was ready to make the jump. She did not like where she was at. And she basically, part of her negotiation was like, listen, I really need help paying this back. And I said, we just can't do it. We're a small clinic. But the offer's here if you want it. And she emailed me back the next day and was like, I'll take the job. I'll figure out how to do it. So if you can align on the mission, vision, values part, the work culture part, the sign-on bonus really is not anything to worry about, at least in my opinion.
And on that note of PTAs, Kylie, you'll have some experience on the PTA side, but just how do you utilize Rafi PTAs? Because Victoria, that could be a route too, for hiring as well.
I am a PTA actually. So the other therapist that works with me, she is a really good friend of mine. So we started together, but she's ready to retire. So I'm like really on crunch time trying to get someone to replace her so that I can, stay up and running.
Sure.
But I'm interested to hear what Kylie might have to say.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I just had a thing that I've noticed with some friends, because I actually had a bunch of roommates that have now just graduated with their DPT. And I was talking to them over the weekend, and there's actually a pervasive mindset right now that the bigger the sign-on bonus, the scarier the culture, that it's hiding some things. Yeah. And so younger generations actually see it as a catch-22. And if you're doing it purely for desperation, the problem is it's a sign of you're just going to be chasing money. You're just chasing your student loans. So unfortunately, you're going to be maybe bringing someone on who's constantly, trying to jump from one place to another instead of making a long-term thing. So if they're asking for a really high sign-on bonus, that's almost scary from what my friends and what I've been able to notice. There are people that are younger that are smarter and trying to either do side businesses while going to school or not taking out as much debt, so that's not as big of a focus. But then they're more stable and they're less likely to be burnt out. So yeah, sometimes I know it's like the flashy, ooh, $5 grand. But yeah, culture is huge. And then my biggest thing was finding PTA programs, even if it's like 2 to 3 hours away. If anyone was willing to come do lectures, I immediately liked that clinic more than anything else. You don't always have to be in the rotation, but even connecting on LinkedIn and taking an interest, a lot of PTAs feel left out and lesser than, and people are just, sometimes they could degrade the assistant field. So if you show love and care, you can get some very loyal employees that will never leave. So.
Rafi, have you always utilized PTAs? How has that ebbed and flowed over the years?
It's ebbed and flowed over the years. When I first bought the clinic, so backstory, I bought this clinic back in 2020, and the people that owned it were 2 PTs that had been PTs for years type deal. They only hired PTs. In their mind, that was like their selling piece. We only treat with PTs or whatever. So I was kind of like that for the first little bit, simply because I'm an OT, and I was like, well, the PT's got their thing going on. It's going to work for them for a while. And then we, inevitably hit a crunch where we're like, well, we need to hire somebody. We need to hire somebody fast. Credentialing was an issue. It takes forever to hire, to get somebody credentialed. So I took a gamble on a PTA, and honestly, it was like, in my mind, like took a gamble on a PTA. If you had talked to the previous owners, they would have said I was taking a gamble. And it was like one of the best decisions we made in the business. Again, if you treat them well, I come from a background of like, especially in the consulting firm where I worked, it was like our philosophy was we hired good people, we treated them well, and we paid them well. Like as long as they were, good performers and good culture work team members, like there was no huss, no fuss from us, right? So we hired a PTA, and she was probably because of what Kylie said, where they kind of feel like kind of spurned by some of the bigger PT chains or something like that, or they're worked to death sometimes. We don't alter a whole lot of how we treat because you're seeing a PTA versus a PT or something like that, which means that our PTAs, when they come into our culture, generally are treating significantly less numbers of visits per day than they were at their previous job, or that they even saw at field work or clinical rotations, which kind of, again, endears them to us. And the way we try to utilize them in the clinic is now we've got more PTs than PTAs, so we're trying to hire a PTA. But when we had it working right, we had like team A and team B on the PT side. And team A was maybe a PT or two and a PTA, and team B was a PT or two and a PTA. And those clinicians kind of shared a pool of patients, right? So there was continuity between all the clinicians working together. We had a good working unit. They knew how each other treated, or the expectations around supervision and progress notes, and even philosophy of care. And the patients got to know, I'm on Courtney's team or whatever. And that's kind of how we talk about it. So it happens at the eval, PT does the eval, PTA comes in, Camden's on my team. She'll be, you'll be between us two for the next 8 weeks, 6 weeks, however long their plan of care is. And we really try to stick with that, a team-based approach, from a logistics standpoint. It makes scheduling easier, but then it also builds patient engagement, patient experience. They're keeping continuity as well. And then the team kind of irons out, because if you have an issue, you're generally dealing with half of your PT staff, or a team on your PT staff rather than the entire PT staff, right?
Yeah. Justin, I'm curious how you utilize PTAs in your practice. How's that kind of changed over the years?
Well, I think I'm going to play devil's advocate, and I think that having PTAs sometimes actually improves the culture of the team, because because it's not like you always need a PT to be there to make the clinical decisions on a plan of care and things like that. And sometimes I've noticed that if you have too many PTs doing that in the same place, you have a higher level of competition for some things that aren't really adding value to the patient's experience. So I think if you find a good PTA and with good personality that works together with a team that has clinical skills, which a lot of them do, then there's almost a better dynamic. And I don't know how to quantify that, but we're at the point now where there is right now there is an actual financial burden to having a PTA if you had access to a PT at the same exact time with the same exact quality. So that's the biggest thing that we're all dealing with, is finding PTs is not as easy as finding PTAs, and for us at least. So we always look for a quality PT if we're trying to fill a void, even if it's a PTA leaving the company, or but if we can't, then we want at least the 1-to-1 ratio in the clinic. But we're not necessarily only looking for PTs either.
Thomas or Victoria, any other questions you guys have here? Otherwise, we do have a few more on this topic as far as staffing goes. The next thing we'll talk about is salary. Rafi, I'm curious how you just approach the conversation with salary. Obviously very similar to what we were just talking about in terms of you likely can't pay the same amount as a big hospital, but how do you just have those conversations? How upfront are you? Are you listing the salary expectation?
We've kind of vacillated on the listing, the salary expectation. I think now, if you look at our job ads, they all have it. We tell people very much up front, like, this is a small clinic, a private clinic. We're not a big hospital. We're not going to be paying you buku money. And I mean, we're pretty open with our team generally at staff meetings and stuff about like financial metrics and revenue per visit and all of that. So people, like, once they're here too, they kind of see like how much we're actually making off of a visit, and it's not like Rafi's not making $1 million off your 10 patients a week or whatever. So we do that, and then we also sell online courses and products, and we do some other, like, we call them entrepreneurial ventures, with in partnership with our clinicians, and that's like unlimited and uncapped revenue potential for them, and that's kind of what we talk about. Listen, you create a course, and we've got the distribution, we've got the email list, we've got the the LMS set up. You create a course, write a book, develop a program, go do a seminar or something like that. And there's a negotiated revenue split somewhere in the neighborhood of 60-40, 50-50, or something like that, depending on the format. And I mean, obviously, we're not like undercutting people when it comes to money either. We're paying, I don't know, if I had to like benchmark it, probably in the 85 to 90% of what, maybe 80% of what like the big hospital pays. And we're upfront with them about the reason why. Like, listen, we get paid less than hospitals. We don't kill you. We're not going to crush you in a mill and grind you up and spit you out. And we're going to partner with you to do whatever kind of professional development we can with you, and then whatever kind of uncapped earning potential you want to explore. So for a while, we had a PT that was training for a half marathon. She developed like a half marathon training program. We've sold, I don't know, a couple dozen of those at $90 a pop or whatever, and she keeps 50% of it. So it's not like, again, I think the expectation on like digital products and stuff is like it's a cash cow, but you do have to do a lot of marketing and stuff to make that work. And we're upfront with them about that too. Like, listen, you're gonna have to market this, you're gonna have to push it, but
Yeah.
the money's yours. It's there for the taking.
Yeah, and it's another opportunity for the therapist to participate in something that, if they work hard on it, if they help market it as well, they're going to see the result. Which I know, Justin, sorry not to lean on you again, but I know you put a lot of money into your YouTube channel, hired someone full time to do YouTube. I know that's paid off, pretty well, just looking at the results that are on the channel. But how do you approach that, digital products and YouTube long term? Is that something you guys will continue to invest in?
Yeah, for sure. There's no turning back, and I think it's the biggest struggle that we've had getting the YouTube channel and the digital brand, which we have a lot more plans, with different courses and things like that we're going to launch. But the biggest thing that I think we did wrong, and are always wanting to get almost pulled back into that thing, is having all these big plans and not having an implementation strategy for them. Because everyone can dream, and and you think of YouTube as a giant macro picture, but you got to just make realistic goals, and you have to treat it like an actual business. That's a lot of people don't understand, is just because you're a digital content creator doesn't mean you're some magical unicorn that does stuff that everyone else can do. You still got to break it down into small metrics, small goals, and act on those goals and improve on it, just like we all build businesses off of. So if you do that, it's much like running a PT practice.
Yeah.
Nothing different.
Thomas, go ahead.
We've kind of had similar situations where smaller practice, but we've had a very large degree of success by offering flexible PTO and kind of bargaining that to increasing that, increasing vacation packages and just showing a lot more flexibility when it came to that, as with a nice little trade-off for salary. So that was just one thing that really kind of helped us.
And
Yeah,
Thomas, explain your model.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Rafi.
Yeah, I was going to say, to double down on that, we lean heavily on, like, we're not corporate. I can't remember last time I've approved PTO. Like, they take it, they put it in, they're fine.
We're the same way. I mean, so for elaboration, Thomas, I'm actually a Cairo, but I run a multidisciplinary practice in the city.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Midtown Manhattan. So we have Cairo, PT, acupuncture, massage, stuff like that. So we have to get talent from all over the place, which is always something that's a little bit tougher. The biggest thing I've noticed when hiring physical therapy is there's just, as the smaller practices, you alluded to this, Rafi, there's just a disconnect sometimes between the compensation and the volume they expect. There's a lot of private equity backed practices in New York that can expect them to see 4 patients an hour, and we'll pay them top dollar. And so that's what they're comparing us to. And they're like, oh, well, I don't want to see that high volume. It's like, well, the economics just don't make sense to pay that salary. There seems to be a bit of that disconnect. And I think actually sharing the EOBs and showing what the reimbursement is, it's actually really helpful in that situation. So they understand and they can put a number to each visit. And I think that's really helped us just try to build transparency, build trust. And then, like I was saying earlier, the vacation packages is really helpful. I mean, we had one of our employees there, they lost their father very suddenly. And it's like, come back when you're ready. Just showing that kind of empathy, I think really has bought us a lot of loyalty and pays off in the long run. When somebody's going through a hard time, just be there for them. And, it is what it is. Stuff's going to happen. And hopefully if you're going through a hard time, somebody will repay the favor.
Yeah. And I know you do, Thomas, a lot of work with corporate offices as well. Will you just explain your strategy there?
Yeah. So it really, luckily I've built a nice little network over the past 11 years. So we work with a bunch of different corporations in a bunch of different avenues. Sometimes we'll just do something as simple as a health fair or a lunch and learn where we'll do presentations. So we got one coming up with Major League Baseball, or Bank of America is right next door. So companies like that where their headquarters are right here. But we've also done where we provided in-house services, on a part-time basis where they wanted to try and bring in physical therapy or chiropractic, or we've done it where I'll see their patients on some of the self-insured companies. We contract with them to see them on a capitated rate in our office where it might be a little bit more cost affordable for them. So different things like that has really helped. And that's all been developing relationships with benefit managers and human resources.
Yeah. Victoria, I was just thinking that could be an opportunity for you just from being in Atlanta. There's going to be a lot of corporate offices, I know Rafi being in Augusta, not as, not so much, but just different opportunities in different areas.
Yeah. In Atlanta, the work is falling off the trucks. All you got to do is back up to it,
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of it, the staffing, I'm sure, Victoria, that's the most challenging part there. All right, cool.
Thomas, on the staffing side, I was just going to make one more comment is, I think as long as we don't handcuff ourselves and look at things black and white, as long as we can assign a value to a lot of different things, we can create a package that works for a person, and I think that's where we can compete against the big, because if you're too big, it's hard to think like that. You can't be agile, but if you do have that opportunity, you can really look at something and have a conversation with a PT before you hire them and say, what's important to you? If it's PTO, then give them a couple more weeks PTO, but they can't have their cake and eat it. You have to have that open conversation about, that has a dollar value, and what means that to you is great. It doesn't mean a lot to everybody. So we can have that package for you.
And for PTO and salary, are you guys saying, hey, you want two extra weeks or 3 extra weeks PTO, whatever it is? Are you just lowering salary, or how does that negotiation go? Because like you're saying, you can't have a high salary and a bunch of PTO. That just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just that, but there's other compensation things that factor, there's, if you offer student loan reimbursement, that's important to certain people, not others. So you can look at it through different lenses. And also you have to assign value to a value, to that it's very expensive to replace somebody. I was on this call the other day with some big old practice owner. They were telling me they ran a study internally with a lot of different data points, and it costs their company $100,000 or more every time they have to actually replace a seasoned physical therapist in their practice. And that's not just from compensation, but it's lost revenue, lost reputation, branding. That you assign those values to people, and you realize that arguing over things that might make or break somebody and keep loyalty extremely long term, there is expense there if they don't stick around too.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too. The time of recruiting somebody else, but then the lost branding, the lost customer loyalty with that specific person is hard to account for. But there is a number value, like you're saying, Justin, to it.
And also
Say yes, team
too. That your team starts to fall apart too if you have a bunch of turnover.
Yeah,
that has to be factored in.
The Say Yes team. Any questions that you guys have? I just want to ask before we move on. It's all right if you're eating lunch too, hanging out. Go ahead, Victoria.
Another question: Has anyone ever tried to do like a mailer through the state associations, like we have PTAG here, and has that worked as far as looking for therapists?
I mean, we have never done that. I know an OT that did it. She's also local here in Augusta, and she was trying to find a PT. I can't remember how much they charged her to do it, and she didn't get any applicants. I feel like direct mail is, I mean, maybe it works at super high volume, like if you're national. It does not work in small geographic markets, because the list you'd be pulling is, there's an OT on the OT side. There's 5,500 licensed OTs in Georgia. Like maybe 10% of that is in Augusta. Like you're just, the volume isn't high enough to make it worth it, right?
Yeah, go ahead, Kylie.
I was, again, with younger therapists, less are joining the APTA and state organizations. So the problem is that if you're targeting maybe older therapists or ones that are looking for a change, but then again, it's what mentality are you looking for? You might be able to reach them, but I think it was like 1 in 10 out of new DPTs are signing up for the APTA. So you're missing almost 90% of like the last 2 to 3 years if you're doing direct mailers. So.
Also, Thomas, I think, I don't know if you guys already touched on it before, but the student program is like, we by far the best return off of having a really good student program.
Yeah, I know that's something you've talked about. We've talked about on the podcast a bunch, and I brought it up before you jumped on, but the housing situation that you guys put together, maybe, Justin, say a little bit more about what you guys are doing, because I do think it's really valuable and just helps you guys long term.
Well, we finally assigned a person to developing all the relationships with the different schools, PT schools, and that's something that if a practice owner has time to do that and really commit to it, that's great. I didn't have time, so I finally put someone in on that. This person also does RTM for us from home, so she's a great fit. But we ended up actually buying a duplex to house our students and offer them very cheap housing, when they're students, because we found out that losing students because of extremely high rents in our area was just killing us, and we hire about 30% of our final term students. We hire on with us, so they get to see us firsthand. We get that long working interview that we can say we can be absolutely sure they're going to be a strong fit for us, and then they don't need training. They're already fully by the time they start with us. So investing in student program is key, and then just having that experience, and it pays off over time, but having that experience where they go back and they start to tell their friends or their school that they had such a good experience with us versus their first or second terms, and that just starts to stick. And after a little while, your clinic, becomes the top for that choice school for their best students. And then you have 8 or 10 each year to fill your 3 or 4 spots that you need filled every year. And all of a sudden you're golden. You're not hiring anymore. You're just recruiting all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Corey, go ahead.
That's brilliant, Justin.
Yeah, just to piggyback on Justin, exactly. When I was working more in the South Florida area, we had FGCU right there, and so we would tap into that DPT program, and then the friends told friends. So even if we didn't have that exact student, because they might be moving after they graduated, but some of their friends would hear about our clinic and then want to come and work there. And then some of the universities have job boards. So we would reach out to like all the Florida universities and even like outside of that and just ask them to post our positions and connect with alumni.
Yeah, that's super cool. Thomas, have you utilized any strategy like that before?
Oh yeah. So I teach a class as an adjunct for operations and procedures for one of the chiro schools down here. So that gave me instant access to the pipeline for chiropractic. And then, I I can't tell you how many DPT programs around here, but between NYU and Columbia were our biggest pipelines. And eventually we were just doing it long enough that word would spread on, and it was kind of on like a part-time basis. We were super flexible with students, just even for paid work or as aides or assistants, whatnot. And my partner was really good with developing relationships with their program directors. And eventually it just became word of mouth where that was on autopilot, have quarterly communications with them and, send them cards for the holidays, and that was great.
Yeah, that's super cool. Rafi, we'll start to wrap it up here. I'm curious on your biggest staffing mistake or just biggest hiring mistakes that you've made that you could maybe give some light to.
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake I made was, well, twofold. Probably hiring too soon, like in the actual recruiting process, not sussing out as much as I should have. And then being in a position and hiring from a sense of desperation rather than like standing by your convictions. Like I told somebody the other day, I have not been in the clinic for years, maybe a patient or two a month. I've been seeing probably 4 or 5 days, half days worth of patients now because our OT left for family reasons, left the town. And I told the team, I was like, I'm going to sacrifice profitability and I'm going to lose. I would go out of business before I hired a bad fit again. So like just standing on that has been big, but the times that like the worst hires going back to like in my mind, the people that just did not work out were people that we hired. Even though there was an underlying sense of this probably isn't going to be a long-term fit, but we needed somebody now for whatever reason, we need somebody now. I think being willing to not obviously tank the business, but like sacrifice short-term profitability in order to get a good fit culturally that's going to be there for a long time, work well with the team, and ultimately drive productivity and profitability up. Is a decision I wish I had made early on. I can already think like their names are flashing through my head. People
You can see the faces.
that we hired, that we even talk about them now, like at staff meetings and stuff like, oh, you remember that one person we hired that was just not a good fit. So there's that. And then not including the team in the hiring process. So now like our process is somebody fills out an application. I give them a call personally. It's like a 15-minute screening call that involves really just culture fit. We're asking them things like the Dan Kennedy question and stuff like that. If they pass that, in my book, they get pitched to the team and they show up to the clinic. I give them a little tour and then they sit down with 2 or 3 of our PTs or their OTs or the admin staff. And then, they leave or whatever. And we have a brief, a post-mortem with the team. And if they get a thumbs up, we move forward with the hiring process. If they don't, we kindly let them go.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's super cool that you involve the team, especially you can do it. You guys are a smaller clinic.
Yeah, we're small enough to do it, right?
Your word's going to get around if you link them up with 2 or 3 therapists. You're quickly going to say, no, this person's not going to be a fit, or I got along super well. Like they actually, helped out on this patient, or they gave me some advice on this, that kind of stuff is really cool. Well, cool. Does anyone have any other questions for Rafi or anybody else on the call? This will be recorded. Yeah, Kylie, go ahead.
Yeah, I know Paul has been bringing awareness to certain clinics that are potentially looking to hire. So like Victoria or Thomas, if you want more awareness, feel free to send maybe over an ad or what you're specifically looking for, and I can, pass it over to Paul and he can post that on LinkedIn. And I'll put my email in the chat right before, so that if you have anything to send over, just send that over to me.
Totally.
Awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for the time. This will be recorded. So if you want to go back, it'll be on the Strata PT website. And then, yeah, we'll just see you guys on the next one.
Cool. Thank you, guys.
Amazing. Thank you, Rafi. Appreciate your time. Thanks,
Take it
Justin.
easy.
Hey, guys. Bye.